The text message glowed on my phone screen like a poisonous thing. Mom, Aiden has a soccer game Saturday. $500 if you want to come. My hand trembled so violently that I dropped the phone onto my kitchen counter, the clatter echoing through my empty townhouse. I pressed my palms flat against the granite, knuckles whitening, trying to steady myself against the wave of nausea that rolled through my stomach. Hey there, beautiful souls. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my story today. I am curious, what part of the world are you tuning in from? Drop your city in the comments below. All right, let us dive into what happened to me. I picked up the phone again, rereading those cold words from my son. My vision blurred as tears welled up, but I blinked them back hard. The autumn sunlight streaming through my window suddenly felt harsh and accusing. I walked to the refrigerator, where a crayon drawing hung beneath a magnet, a stick figure labeled Grandma, holding hands with two smaller figures. Aiden had drawn it 2 years ago, back when I could see my grandchildren whenever I wanted. The coffee in my mug had gone cold. I dumped it in the sink and gripped the counter's edge again, staring at my reflection in the window above. 50 years old, still working doubles at the hospital as a nurse, still paying off the loan I had given my son for his business startup. That business had taken off spectacularly. Now he lived in a mansion in the suburbs while I counted pennies to keep my modest townhouse. I opened my banking app with shaking fingers. The balance mocked me. $847.23 until next Friday's paycheck. Rent was due, groceries needed buying. My car registration was overdue. But the thought of missing another of Aiden's games, of the disappointed questions from my 8-year-old grandson about why Grandma never came anymore, carved a hole through my chest. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Let me know by tonight. Limited seats. Limited seats, as if family required reservations, as if love came with a price tag. I sank into the kitchen chair, my scrubs still smelling faintly of antiseptic from my morning shift. My feet ached from 12 hours of walking hospital corridors. My back screamed from lifting patients. And now this. My own flesh and blood holding my grandchildren hostage behind a paywall. I pulled up my son's contact and stared at his photo. A professional headshot from his company website, all white teeth and expensive suit. My thumb hovered over the call button, then moved to the message icon instead. Typing felt safer. Less likely to make me say something I couldn't take back. I can't afford it this month. Please. I hit send before I could delete it. The screen showed read almost immediately. Then the 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. My jaw clenched so hard my molars ached. I set the phone face down on the table and stood, needing movement, needing to do something with the energy crackling under my skin. The laundry basket sat by the hallway. I grabbed it and carried it to the living room, dumping clothes onto the couch with more force than necessary. Socks, scrubs, the worn flannel pajamas with the hole in the knee. I folded mechanically, creasing each item with sharp precision, my hands working while my mind churned. My phone chimed. I left the half-folded towel and grabbed it. The message filled the screen. Mom, we talked about this. Boundaries are important. If you can't respect our family's financial arrangements, maybe we need more space. The towel slipped from my fingers. More space. As if the 2 weeks between visits wasn't already an ocean. As if charging his own mother wasn't already a chasm, wide enough to swallow everything we'd been. I typed back with fingers that trembled. I changed your diapers. I worked 3 jobs to keep you fed. Deleted it, typed again. You owe me $30,000 from the business loan. Deleted that too. Finally settled on, Can we please talk about this in person? No response. The message sat there, delivered, but unread. Minutes ticked by. I returned to folding, each movement harder, faster. A pillowcase snapped in the air as I shook it out. The sound cracked through the quiet room like a whip. 15 minutes passed. Then 30. My phone remained silent. I walked to my bedroom and opened the closet. Shoeboxes lined the top shelf, and I pulled down the one marked Memories. Inside, photograph after photograph showed a chubby-cheeked boy in my arms. Birthday parties where I'd saved for months to afford the cake and decorations. Christmas mornings with presents wrapped in newspaper comics because that's all I could manage. His high school graduation where I'd worn my only dress, the blue one I'd owned for a decade. Beneath the photos sat a folder. I pulled it out, opened it. The loan agreement stared back at me, notarized and official. $30,000 to be repaid within 5 years at 0 interest. That deadline had passed 2 years ago. I'd never mentioned it, never pushed. He was building something, creating a future, and what kind of mother would I be to demand payment? I slammed the folder shut and shoved it back into the box. My hands pressed against the closet wall, steadying myself as my breath came in short bursts. The plaster felt cool under my palms, solid and real when everything else seemed to be crumbling. The phone buzzed. I lunged for it, nearly tripping over the stack of shoeboxes I'd knocked loose. His name flashed across the screen. Not a text this time, a call. My thumb hovered over the green button. 3 rings, 4. On the 5th, I answered. Mom, I can't keep doing this. His voice came through flat, rehearsed. Background noise filtered in, children laughing, a television playing cartoons. My jaw clenched. I paced to the window, staring out at the street where I'd taught him to ride a bike. Doing what? Letting me see my own grandchildren? It's complicated. Then uncomplicate it. The words came out sharp, edged with something harder than I'd intended. Silence stretched between us. I heard him exhale, long and deliberate, the way he used to when preparing to argue about homework or curfew. I'll come by tomorrow, 1 hour, that's it. The line went dead. I stood there clutching the phone until my knuckles ached. Then I hurled it onto the bed where it bounced once before settling into the rumpled comforter. The folder called to me from the closet, but I turned away from it. Evidence wouldn't matter. Logic wouldn't matter. Something else was happening here, something beneath the surface that I couldn't quite name. The kitchen needed cleaning. I moved on autopilot, filling the sink with scalding water and dish soap. Suds rose in white peaks as I scrubbed plates that were already clean. The sponge abraded against ceramic in rhythmic circles. Scrub, rinse, repeat. My reflection wavered in the window above the sink, distorted by darkness and the glare of overhead lights. 50 years old, and I looked older. When had those lines carved so deep around my mouth? A car door slammed outside. I froze, hands submerged in water. Through the window, I watched my neighbor, a young woman whose name I'd never learned, extract a toddler from a car seat. The child reached up, arms extended in perfect trust. The woman scooped her up without hesitation, without negotiation, without a price tag attached to affection. The plate in my hand cracked. Not shattered, just a hairline fracture running from rim to center. I'd squeezed too hard. Blood mixed with dishwater, swirling pink around my fingers. A small cut on my thumb where the broken edge had caught flesh. I wrapped my hand in a dish towel and left the dishes. The living room couch received me like an old friend, sagging in familiar places. I didn't turn on the television, didn't reach for a book. Just sat there in the semi-darkness, lit only by the kitchen light spilling through the doorway. Tomorrow, he would come. Tomorrow, I would see him face to face, and maybe then I could understand. The loan papers meant nothing now. I'd already decided. I'd forgive the debt. Tell him so. Remove that obstacle, that potential excuse. Strip away everything until only the raw truth remained. My purse sat on the coffee table. I pulled out my wallet and counted the bills inside. $243, grocery money for the next 2 weeks. I added it to the pile I'd started in the kitchen drawer yesterday. Another $300 set aside from my last paycheck. Just over $500 total. Enough for one visit if I scraped together the remaining amount from the jar of change in my bedroom. I gathered the coins. Quarters, dimes, nickels clinked into my palm as I sorted through them on the kitchen counter. Stacked them in neat rows, tallying silently. $278.35. Combined with the cash, I had $821.35. More than enough. I could pay him twice over, and he'd let me see those babies. Hold them. Hear their voices calling me Grandma. The money sat there in organized piles, a monument to something I couldn't name. Desperation? Defeat? I swept it all into an envelope and sealed it shut. Tomorrow. 1 hour. Whatever he wanted to say, I'd listen. Whatever he needed, I'd provide. Mothers didn't stop being mothers just because their children made it complicated. Right, Block 4. The morning arrived with gray light filtering through my bedroom curtains. I'd been awake for hours, watching shadows shift across the ceiling, my body rigid beneath the blankets. At 6, I gave up the pretense of sleep and shuffled to the bathroom. The mirror reflected a woman I barely recognized, eyes hollowed by dark circles, shoulders curved inward as if bracing against an invisible blow. I showered, dressed in my navy slacks and the cream blouse my daughter-in-law had once complimented. The memory of her smile when she'd said it was pretty felt like something from another lifetime. I brushed my hair, applied minimal makeup, tried to make myself presentable. Grandmothers should look put together. Stable. Like someone worthy of being in a child's life. The envelope sat on the kitchen counter where I'd left it. I picked it up, turned it over in my hands, felt the thickness of bills inside. My fingers trembled as I tucked it into my purse. The weight of it pulled at my shoulder when I slung the bag across my body. 8:30. He'd said 9. I had 30 minutes to drive across town to his house, the house I'd helped with the down payment on 3 years ago, back when things were different. Back when he'd hugged me and called me his rock. Traffic moved in sluggish waves through the downtown corridor. I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles whitening as I merged onto the highway. Every red light felt like torture. My chest tightened with each passing block, breath coming shorter, faster. I cracked the window. Cold air rushed in, stinging my cheeks. His subdivision appeared on the left. Manicured lawns, identical mailboxes, trees planted at precise intervals. I turned onto Oakmont Drive and crawled past houses until I reached number 47. The white colonial with black shutters. 2 cars in the driveway. My son's truck and her sedan. I parked on the street. Sat there with the engine running, hands locked on the wheel. Through the front window, I could see movement. A shadow passing. Someone walking from one room to another. My grandchildren were inside. Lily and James, 4 and 2 years old. I'd missed Lily's last birthday. Hadn't seen James since he was 18 months. The engine died when I twisted the key. Silence pressed in around me. I grabbed my purse, checked the envelope once more, and stepped out onto the pavement. My legs felt unsteady as I walked up the driveway. Each step required conscious effort, as if I were moving through water. The doorbell chimed. I heard footsteps approaching, heavy and deliberate. The lock clicked. My son stood in the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, his father's build. His jaw was set, eyes flat and unreadable. He didn't smile, didn't move aside to let me in. "You're early." "I know, I'm sorry." He glanced over his shoulder, then back at me. His hand remained on the doorframe, blocking entry. Behind him, I caught a glimpse of the living room. Toys scattered on the carpet, a small pink backpack near the stairs. Evidence of the life I was locked out of. "You have it?" I reached into my purse, pulled out the envelope, extended it toward him. He took it without meeting my eyes, tore it open right there, counted the bills with methodical precision. His fingers moved through 20s, 50s, 10s. When he finished, he folded the money and shoved it into his pocket. "1 hour," he said. He stepped aside. I moved past him into the house, my body tense, hyper-aware of his proximity. The door closed behind me with a soft thud that sounded final. The living room looked different from my last visit. New furniture, different paint color, family photos on the mantel that I wasn't in. I turned toward the stairs, drawn by the sound of small feet running across the floor above. A child's laugh rang out, high and sweet. My heart clenched. "They're upstairs," he said from behind me. His voice was cold, transactional. "I'll get them." He moved past me and climbed the stairs. I stood frozen in place, listening to his heavy footfalls overhead. Muffled voices. Then suddenly, 2 small faces appeared at the top of the landing, peering down through the banister rails. Lily came first, descending slowly, 1 step at a time. She wore purple leggings and a sweater with a unicorn on it. Her hair was longer now, pulled into 2 ponytails. She stopped 3 steps from the bottom and stared at me with solemn, dark eyes. "Hi, sweetheart," I whispered. She didn't respond. Behind her, James clung to his father's leg, half hidden, thumb in his mouth. He'd grown so much. His baby face had lengthened, features sharpening into boyhood. My son lifted James and carried him down the remaining stairs, set him on the floor near his sister. Both children stood there, uncertain, looking back at their father for guidance. I knelt down, bringing myself to their level. Extended my arms. Neither child moved toward me. "It's Grandma," I said, voice cracking. I reached into my purse, hands trembling as I pulled out the wrapped packages I'd brought. The paper crinkled loudly in the silence. Lily's eyes tracked the movement, but her body remained rigid, pressed against the wall near the staircase. James shifted his weight from foot to foot, still watching his father. I set the gifts on the floor between us and slid them forward. The packages scraped against the hardwood, stopping inches from Lily's purple sneakers. She looked down at them, then back up at me, her small mouth pressed into a thin line. "You can open them," I said softly. My son's hand came down on Lily's shoulder. His fingers tightened there, a clear message passing between them. The little girl shook her head and stepped backward, away from the presents. Heat rushed through my chest, flooding upward into my face. I stood too quickly, knees cracking, and turned toward him. He stood there with that same expression he'd worn at the door, blank, unmoved, superior. His arms crossed over his chest. "What did you tell them about me?" The words came out sharp, louder than I intended. "Nothing they didn't need to know." He shifted his stance, blocking the children further behind him. "You made your choices." I moved closer, closing the distance between us. My hands balled into fists at my sides. The room felt smaller suddenly, airless. Behind him, I could see Lily pulling James toward the kitchen doorway, both children backing away from the rising tension. I made choices? My voice climbed higher. You're the one keeping them from their grandmother. You're the one demanding money like I'm some stranger off the street. He uncrossed his arms and took a step toward me. We stood nearly toe-to-toe now, his breath hitting my face, his jaw clenched and unclenched, the muscle jumping beneath his skin. You weren't there when Rachel died, he said, each word deliberate and cutting. You were too busy with your own life, your new friends, your trips, everything but your family. The accusation hit like a physical blow. I stumbled backward, my hip catching the edge of the coffee table. The packages on the floor blurred as tears filled my eyes, but I blinked them back hard. Refused to let them fall. That's not fair. My voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I came to the hospital. I was there at the funeral. I tried. You tried? He laughed, harsh and bitter. The sound echoed off the walls. You came for 2 days. 2 days, and then you went back to your life. I had 2 kids under 3 and a dead wife, and you sent a casserole and a card. My throat constricted. I reached for the back of his couch, needing something solid to hold on to. The leather was cool beneath my palm, smooth and expensive. New furniture that I'd never been consulted about, in a house I barely recognized anymore. From the kitchen came the sound of cabinets opening, small hands rummaging through drawers. The children were looking for something, or maybe just hiding, putting distance between themselves and this confrontation they shouldn't be witnessing. I asked you if you needed help. My nails dug into the couch back. You told me you had it handled. You told me not to come. And you listened. He moved around me, pacing toward the window. His reflection appeared in the glass, distorted and dark. You were relieved. I could hear it in your voice. You didn't want the burden of my grief or my kids. I followed him, my shoes thudding against the floor, grabbed his arm and forced him to turn around. His muscle tensed beneath my grip, but he didn't pull away. We stood there, locked in position, breathing hard. That's not true, I said through gritted teeth. You shut me out. You changed the locks. You stopped answering my calls. He wrenched his arm free, the movement violent enough that I staggered sideways. My shoulder hit the wall with a dull thump. Pain radiated down my arm, but I barely felt it through the rage building in my chest. Because every time you called, it was about what you needed. He shot back. Your feelings, your loss. Like you were the only one hurting. The words hit me like a physical blow. I pressed my back harder against the wall, feeling the texture of the paint rough against my blazer. My chest tightened, each breath becoming a conscious effort. The room seemed to tilt slightly, walls pressing inward. Down the hallway, a door clicked shut. One of the children seeking refuge from the escalating storm. The sound echoed in my skull, amplifying the throbbing that had started behind my eyes. I pushed off from the wall, legs unsteady but determined. Crossed the space between us in 3 long strides. My finger jabbed toward his chest, stopping just short of contact. Don't you dare rewrite history. My voice came out raw, stripped of its earlier control. I was on a plane within hours. You're the one who had your neighbor turn me away at the door. He turned his back to me, shoulders rising and falling with harsh breaths. His hands gripped the windowsill, knuckles pale against the dark wood. Outside, the sun had shifted lower, casting long shadows across his manicured lawn. A lawn I'd never been invited to see bloom through spring. You showed up with your opinions, he said without turning. About the funeral, about the kids' routines, about how I was grieving wrong. My hands curled into fists at my sides. Nails bit into my palms hard enough to leave crescents. The pain felt distant, overshadowed by the heat spreading through my limbs. I wanted to grab him, shake him, make him see the distortion in his memories. Instead, I walked to the kitchen doorway, leaned against the frame because standing unsupported suddenly seemed impossible. Through the opening, I could see his daughter, my granddaughter, sitting at the breakfast bar. Her small fingers traced patterns in spilled sugar, creating spirals and lines. She didn't look up, but her shoulders were hunched, defensive. "I tried to help you," I said, voice barely above a whisper. The words felt inadequate, flimsy against the weight of his accusations. He finally turned from the window. His face was flushed, jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. Moisture gathered at the corners of his eyes, but refused to fall. "Help!" The word exploded from him. "You wanted to take over. Move in? Rearrange everything? Like Vanessa had never existed?" My knees buckled slightly. I gripped the doorframe harder, splinters catching against my palm. His wife's name, spoken aloud for the first time since I'd arrived, hung in the air between us. The syllables seemed to suck oxygen from the room. I opened my mouth, but nothing emerged. My throat had closed, tight and burning. Sweat prickled along my hairline despite the air conditioning that hummed steadily overhead. "That's what you think?" I finally managed. Each word scraped against my vocal cords. "That I wanted to erase her?" He moved toward the kitchen, toward his daughter, placing himself between us. A barrier of flesh and bone and misplaced anger. His hand rested on the counter, fingers splayed wide. "You never approved of her." His voice had dropped lower, more dangerous. "You smiled and nodded, but I saw it. Every holiday, every birthday. That look that said she wasn't good enough for your son." The accusation landed in my gut like a stone. I straightened despite the trembling in my legs, despite the way my vision blurred at the edges. Stepped into the kitchen, refusing to be relegated to the periphery of this conversation. I moved closer to the kitchen island, each step deliberate despite the trembling in my calves. The granite counter felt cold beneath my fingertips as I pressed both palms flat against its surface. The overhead light reflected off the polished stone, creating small halos that danced at the edge of my vision. "I loved her," I said. "And you're using her memory as a weapon." He flinched. The movement was slight, a barely perceptible drawing back of his shoulders. But I caught it. Behind him, his daughter made a sound, something between a whimper and a sigh. The baby monitor on the counter crackled with static, then went silent. I moved toward the refrigerator where crayon drawings were held by magnets shaped like fruit. My hands shook as I touched one, a crude rendering of a stick figure family. 4 people, one notably taller than the others. Me. Drawn in purple crayon by small hands that still couldn't quite control the lines. The paper was smooth between my fingers, slightly waxy from the crayon. I pulled it free, and 2 other drawings fluttered to the floor. They landed face up on the white tiles, bright colors stark against the pristine surface. "She drew these for me." My voice cracked on the last word. 3 weeks ago, when I could still visit without emptying my savings account. He turned away, but not before I saw his jaw working, grinding teeth together with enough force that I heard the small clicking sound his mouth made. His hand swept across the counter, knocking aside a plastic sippy cup. It rolled, spilling residual juice in a sticky trail. You don't understand the pressure. His words came out strangled. The bills, the daycare, the medical expenses from when she was born, the mortgage. I set the drawing down carefully, smoothing its corners with trembling fingers. Moved around the island, closing the distance between us. He stepped back, bumping into a chair. It scraped against the tile with a harsh screech that made us both wince. So, you charge your mother? I kept my voice level, though my chest burned with the effort. $500, like I'm buying tickets to a show. His daughter whimpered louder now, her small fists rubbing at her eyes. The sound pierced through my anger, creating a hollow space in my ribcage. I wanted to go to her, to lift her from that high chair, to wipe the tear tracks from her rounded cheeks. But he stood between us, a wall I couldn't breach. Last month, you said it was temporary. I retrieved my purse from where I'd set it on the counter earlier. The leather was worn smooth from years of use, soft under my fingers. I dug through its contents. Old receipts, lip balm, a crumpled tissue. Found my phone and pulled up my banking app. The screen glowed in my hand as I held it toward him. Numbers in red, negative balance, overdraft fees stacked like corpses. This is what temporary looks like. My arm remained steady despite the tremor running through my entire body. I've paid you $2,500 in 5 months. Borrowed from my retirement. Skipped medications. I'm eating once a day. He glanced at the screen, then away. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. One hand came up to rub at his face, dragging down across his features until his skin pulled taut. That's not my problem. But his voice had lost its edge. The words came out hollow, automatic. I lowered my phone. The screen went dark, throwing shadows across my palm. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard, I thought it might crack bone. I walked past him, toward his daughter, half expecting him to block me. He didn't move. The baby's face was streaked with tears and bits of mashed banana. Her tiny chest heaved with each breath. I grabbed a cloth from the sink, ran it under cold water. The liquid splashed my wrists, soaking the cuffs of my sleeves. Don't. His hand closed around my forearm. Not rough, but firm. Insistent. I froze, the wet cloth dripping onto the floor. Water pooled at my feet, seeping into the grout lines between tiles. His grip tightened slightly, then released. I felt the heat of his palm, even after he pulled away. $500, I said, turning to face him fully. Or I leave. That's what you mean, isn't it? His silence was answer enough. He couldn't meet my eyes, instead focusing on some point past my shoulder. His chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. A muscle in his neck twitched rhythmically. I dropped the cloth into the sink. It landed with a wet slap. Moved back to my purse, fingers fumbling with the zipper of the inner pocket. Found my checkbook, the register nearly empty. 3 checks left. I pulled one free, the perforation tearing with a soft ripping sound. The pen shook in my grip as I pressed it to paper. My handwriting came out jagged, barely legible. $500. Written to my own son, for the privilege of wiping banana from my granddaughter's face. I signed my name at the bottom, the cursive letters bleeding slightly where the pen hesitated. The ink smeared under my thumb as I tore the check free. The sound of paper ripping filled the kitchen, louder than it should have been. I held it out between us, my arm extended fully, refusing to step closer. He stared at the check like it might bite him. His jaw worked side to side, grinding teeth I couldn't see. The baby had stopped crying, now just whimpering softly from her high chair. That sound cut deeper than any scream. My hand remained steady in the air, though my shoulder burned from the strain of holding it there. Seconds stretched. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a car door slammed. He reached forward and snatched the check from my fingers. The paper made a crisp sound as he folded it once, then twice, creasing it with deliberate precision. He shoved it into his front pocket without looking at it again. His hand stayed there, pressed against the denim, as if making sure it wouldn't escape. I moved past him toward the high chair. My hip bumped the kitchen table, rattling the salt and pepper shakers. The baby's eyes tracked me, wide and wet, her lower lip still trembling. I picked up the damp cloth from the sink, wrung it out with both hands. Water spiraled down the drain. The banana smeared across her cheeks, came away in sticky clumps. I worked methodically, starting at her forehead, moving down to her chin. Her skin felt hot under my fingertips. Fever hot. I pressed the back of my hand to her temple, then her neck. The heat radiated through the cloth. How long has she been burning up like this? He shifted his weight behind me. She's fine. I spun around, still holding the cloth. Drops of water scattered across the linoleum. She's not fine. When did this start? His shoulders rose and fell. He wouldn't look at either of us now, just stared at the wall above the sink where a calendar hung, 3 months out of date. His arms crossed over his chest, defensive, closed off. I turned back to the baby, touched her forehead again. Definitely a fever. I pulled her from the high chair, her small body rigid at first, then melting against me. She buried her face in my neck, her breath hot and rapid against my collarbone. My shirt grew damp where her nose pressed. The diaper bag sat on the floor near the back door, half unzipped. I crouched down, keeping her balanced on my hip, and dug through it with my free hand. Empty juice bottles, crushed crackers, a single diaper, no medicine, no thermometer, nothing useful. Where's her medicine? I stood too quickly, my knee popping audibly. The baby flinched at the sound. He pointed toward the counter near the microwave, where a bottle of children's fever reducer stood next to a stack of dirty plates. I crossed the kitchen in 3 strides, grabbed the bottle, shook it. Nearly empty. Maybe half a dose left, if that. I squeezed the dropper, drawing up what little remained. The pink liquid barely reached the first measurement line. The baby's mouth opened automatically when I brought it close, and she swallowed without protest. Her eyes fluttered closed. You need to take her to urgent care. I adjusted my grip on her, supporting her head more firmly. She'd gone limp now, exhausted from crying. Can't. His voice came out flat, emotionless. What do you mean you can't? He pulled his phone from his back pocket, tapped the screen, held it up. I squinted at the numbers displayed there. Bank account balance, $12.47. The screen went dark. He shoved the phone back in his pocket. My jaw clenched so hard my molars ached. The baby's breathing had evened out, but her skin still burned against mine. I shifted her weight, feeling my lower back protest. 50 years old, and my body reminded me with every movement. I walked to the living room, my feet moving before my brain caught up. The carpet here was stained, dark patches near the coffee table where something had spilled and never been properly cleaned. Toys scattered everywhere. Plastic blocks, stuffed animals with matted fur, board books with torn pages. I sat on the couch, springs squeaking under my weight, and cradled the baby against my chest. He followed, hovering in the doorway. His fingers drummed against the frame, a nervous rhythm that matched my racing pulse. The late afternoon sun cut through the blinds, striping everything in gold and shadow. I'll take her, I said, not asking permission. His drumming stopped. "You already paid for your visit." The words hung in the air between us, sharp and ugly. My vision blurred at the edges. I blinked hard, forcing my eyes to focus on the baby's face instead of his. Her cheeks were flushed pink, her breathing shallow. A thin line of drool escaped the corner of her mouth. I stood up slowly, testing my balance with the extra weight. The baby stirred, but didn't wake. I walked toward the door, toward him, toward the exit that suddenly felt miles away. Each step deliberate, each breath measured. He moved into my path. Not blocking completely, but enough that I'd have to push past. His hands hung at his sides, fingers curling and uncurling. A vein pulsed in his temple. "Move." My voice came out low, steady, dangerous. I shifted the baby's weight in my arms, turning my shoulder slightly to create a shield between her feverish body and his. The movement made my lower back protest, but I held firm, planting my feet wider on the stained carpet. He didn't step aside. Instead, his jaw clenched, the muscles working beneath his skin like rope pulled taut. The house creaked around us. Somewhere in the back rooms, I heard the television still blaring cartoons, voices high-pitched and cheerful, absurdly out of place. The baby's forehead burned against my collarbone through my shirt. I could feel her heartbeat, fast and frantic like a bird's. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Once, twice, 3 times. He ignored it, but his eyes flicked down for a fraction of a second. That was when I moved. I shouldered past him. Not rough, but not gentle either. My hip connecting with his as I crossed the threshold into the narrow hallway. The walls pressed in on both sides, covered in photographs with cracked frames. School pictures, birthday parties, moments I'd paid to be part of. Behind me, his footsteps followed, heavy, deliberate. The floorboards groaned under his weight. "You can't just take her," he said, his voice tight with something I couldn't name. Anger, maybe, or fear. I didn't answer. Words felt useless now, empty things that would dissolve before they reached him. Instead, I kept walking, my fingers spread across the baby's back, feeling each ragged breath she took. The front door loomed ahead, scratched wood with a peeling coat of paint. Sunlight leaked around its edges, promising escape. My purse sat on the small table near the entrance, right where I'd dropped it when I arrived. I grabbed it with my free hand, the leather strap sliding up my forearm. My car keys jangled inside. The sound made my pulse spike. He reached around me, his arm extending past my shoulder to press his palm flat against the door. Not pushing it closed, but holding it shut. His breath hit the back of my neck, warm and rapid. I could smell coffee on it, stale and bitter. "The hospital costs money," he said. "You know that, right? Who's paying for it?" I turned slowly, careful not to jostle the baby. Our faces were close now, close enough that I could see the exhaustion carved into the lines around his eyes, the gray threading through his beard. For a moment, something flickered in his expression. Something that looked like the boy I'd raised, the one who used to wake me up in the middle of the night with bad dreams and reach for my hand. Then it was gone. "I am," I said quietly, "like I always do." His hand dropped from the door. He took a step back, then another, his shoulders slumping forward. The hallway suddenly felt wider, emptier. I watched him retreat into the shadows of his own house, past the broken toys and stained furniture, until he was just a silhouette against the bright chaos of the television light. I pushed the door open with my elbow. The evening air hit my face, cool and clean, carrying the smell of cut grass and exhaust from the nearby highway. My car sat at the curb, a reliable old sedan with a dent in the passenger door and over 200,000 miles on it. I'd driven it across 3 states once, chasing a job opportunity that fell through. It had never let me down. The baby whimpered as I fumbled with the back door, trying to balance her weight while pulling the handle. My arms shook from holding her for so long. I'd need to get a car seat, I realized. The thought struck me with unexpected force. The practical implications of what I was doing, the reality of it. But I pushed it aside and laid her carefully across the back seat, wedging my purse beneath her head as a makeshift pillow. I climbed into the driver's seat and locked the doors. The click echoed in the quiet interior. Through the windshield, I could see his house, the windows glowing yellow in the deepening dusk. No one came out. No one chased me down the cracked driveway or demanded I bring her back. My hands trembled as I started the engine. The familiar rumble steadied me, gave me something concrete to focus on. I pulled away from the curb slowly, watching the house shrink in my rearview mirror, until it was just another shape in a long line of similar structures, all leaning slightly, all holding their own private struggles behind closed doors. The baby coughed, a wet, rattling sound that made my stomach clench. I pressed harder on the gas pedal. The hospital was 15 minutes away if traffic was light. Maybe 12 if I pushed it. Red lights bled into the darkening sky ahead, and I aimed for them like they were salvation. Block 1010. 6 months had passed since that night. The hospital lights, the questions, the social workers with their clipboards and concerned expressions, all of it had led here, to this moment in my living room on a Saturday morning. Sunlight poured through the windows I'd scrubbed clean last week. The coffee table held no stacks of unpaid bills anymore, just a plastic bowl of Cheerios and a sippy cup decorated with cartoon elephants. I sat cross-legged on the carpet, watching her toddle between the couch and armchair, her small hands gripping furniture for balance. She wore the yellow dress I'd found at the thrift store, tiny white flowers printed across the fabric. Her laughter filled spaces that had been silent too long. The sound of it still caught me off guard sometimes, made my chest tighten with something I couldn't quite name. She dropped onto her bottom with a soft thump, surprised but unhurt, and I reached over to steady her. Her fingers wrapped around mine, sticky from breakfast. The apartment had changed. New curtains hung in the bedroom, cheerful blue instead of the sagging beige that had been there before. A crib stood against the wall, assembled by my neighbor's husband after I'd struggled with the instructions for an hour. Toys littered the floor, blocks, stuffed animals, a plastic telephone that rang when she pressed the buttons. I'd never imagined these things here, never thought I'd be picking up scattered puzzle pieces at 50 years old. The court date was fresh in my mind. 3 weeks ago, standing before the judge with my lawyer beside me, explaining everything. The prosecutor had been young, earnest, presenting the case against my son with clinical efficiency, neglect, endangerment. The words had fallen like stones into still water. I'd testified, my voice steady despite the trembling in my legs. Described what I'd found that night, the conditions, the empty refrigerator, the smell. He'd been sentenced to 18 months, mandatory parenting classes after release, supervised visitation only. The judge's gavel had cracked down, final and absolute. Emergency custody had become permanent guardianship. The paperwork sat in a folder on my kitchen counter, official stamps and signatures making it real. I was responsible now for another life, completely and totally. The weight of it should have crushed me. Instead, It had straightened my spine. I'd quit my evening shifts at the distribution center. The day job at the insurance office paid enough if I was careful. Mrs. Chen from 3B watched her during work hours, refusing payment but accepting the groceries I brought every week. The network of help had surprised me. Neighbors I'd barely known offering hand-me-down clothes, co-workers donating a high chair, the woman from church bringing by casseroles and disposable pans. She pulled herself up using my knee, babbling something that might have been words or might have been nonsense. Her eyes, dark brown and clear now, no longer clouded with illness, fixed on mine. I lifted her into my lap, felt her weight settle against my chest. She smelled like baby shampoo and the lavender detergent I used on her clothes. The restraining order meant he couldn't contact me, couldn't show up demanding money or access. The silence from that direction was absolute, a door closed and locked. Sometimes I wondered if he thought about her at all. Then I'd look down at her face and decide it didn't matter. She was here. She was safe. That was enough. My phone buzzed on the end table. A text from the pediatrician's office confirming Tuesday's appointment. She'd gained weight, the doctor had said last month, clearly pleased. Her developmental milestones were catching up. The respiratory infection had cleared completely. Every good report felt like a small victory, evidence that I'd done the right thing. I carried her to the window. Outside, the neighborhood looked different in daylight, less threatening. Trees lined the street, their leaves rustling in the morning breeze. A couple walked past with a dog. Normal life? Ordinary moments? She pressed her palm against the glass, leaving a small handprint. My savings account had dwindled to almost nothing, then slowly begun to rebuild. $10 here, $20 there. I'd learned to budget differently, to prioritize in ways I never had before. The credit card debt still existed, but I'd stopped the bleeding. The calls from collection agencies had decreased. Baby steps toward stability, toward something sustainable. She yawned, rubbing her eyes with small fists. Nap time approaching. I settled into the rocking chair I'd bought secondhand, the wood worn smooth by previous owners. She curled against me, her breathing gradually slowing, deepening. I rocked gently, the familiar creak of the chair marking time. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but no longer empty. Preschool eventually, homework, school plays, all the things I'd missed the first time around, when I'd been young and overwhelmed and making mistake after mistake. This time would be different. This time, I knew what mattered. Her hand relaxed against my arm as sleep claimed her. I kept rocking, kept holding her, storing up this moment against whatever challenges lay ahead. The apartment was quiet except for our breathing, synchronized now, two lives intertwined by necessity that had become something deeper. I was a grandmother raising her granddaughter. Not how I'd imagined this stage of life, but perhaps exactly what I'd needed. Purpose, second chances, the opportunity to get it right. Outside, clouds drifted across the sun, then cleared. Light flooded back in, warm and golden, illuminating dust motes floating through the air like tiny stars. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.